December 6, 1939. Karelia, Finland. The Battle of Kola. The world is silent except for the wind, a hollow, ghostly howl crawling over the white plains. Snow stretches endlessly, swallowing the forests, the rivers, and the bodies already buried beneath it. The temperature hangs at 40 degrees below zero. Guns jam. Flesh freezes, breath turns to steam, a bright white flare in the air that says, "I'm alive, shoot me." A Soviet column pushes through the trees, hundreds of men wrapped in heavy wool, faces red from frostbite and vodka. They outnumber the Finnish defenders by the thousands. The Soviets carry Maxim machine guns and rifles still warm from the factories of Leningrad. Behind them, tank treads grind through snow, engines choking in the cold. And yet, not one of them is safe. Somewhere among the snowdrifts, a man lies still, not moving, not breathing. His rifle rests across a mound of packed snow, the barrel glinting just once before it disappears under frost. His name is Simo Hayha. Age 24, a farmer by trade, a hunter by nature, and now a soldier by necessity. He watches through the iron sights of his Mosin-Nagant rifle. No scope, just steel and instinct. The scope could reflect sunlight, betray his position, and in a world this cold, even the faint shimmer of glass can mean death. So he shoots with bare eyes. The wind picks up again, and Simo takes a mouthful of snow. He lets it melt on his tongue, cooling his breath until no vapor escapes. He chews ice to become invisible. To the Soviet soldiers, he is no longer human. He's just part of the frozen landscape. A single rifle crack shatters the silence. A Soviet officer drops where he stands, his helmet tumbling across the snow. The men panic, diving for cover behind the white ridges. But there is no cover, only snow and death, and a ghost they can't see. By nightfall, 7 more fall. No one ever sees where the shots come from. Simo adjusts his scarf, wipes the frost from his rifle, and waits for the next column. His trigger finger burns from the cold, but he doesn't care. He's been here for hours, maybe days. The snow doesn't feel cold anymore. It feels like home. He shifts his body deeper into the trench he carved himself. Every mound, every shadow, every curve of the terrain has been studied. This place, Kola, is his farm now, but instead of fields, he cultivates silence and death. At night, he builds a small snow wall in front of his firing position. It absorbs muzzle flash and conceals movement. He breathes slowly, eyes wide, ears open. The creak of distant boots tells him another patrol is coming. The Finns have a saying, Kola kista. Kola holds. But it doesn't hold because of trenches or artillery. It holds because of men like Simo, ghosts that haunt the frost. Down the line, a Soviet sergeant whispers to his commander, "We are fighting the White Death." The name spreads like fire through the Soviet camps. At first, it's a rumor, then a warning, then a prayer, whispered before sleep. "Don't let the White Death find me." And as the blizzard rages through the night, Simo reloads his rifle. His hands are cracked and bleeding. His eyes burn from wind and smoke, but he does not stop. Because for every breath he takes, one more enemy will not. As dawn breaks over the frozen horizon, the snowdrifts are no longer white. They're stained, a battlefield painted by one man's patience. And somewhere in that silence, the legend of the ghost of Kola begins. Before the war, before the silence, before the frost turned him into myth, Simo Hayha was just a man from the Finnish countryside. He was born in 1905 in a small village called Raujärvi, where winters were long and work was endless. His hands were the hands of a farmer, rough, scarred, used to the rhythm of pulling a plow or mending fences in the snow. He grew up with rifles the same way other boys grew up with tools. Hunting wasn't sport, it was survival. Every rabbit, every deer was a meal. Every shot a lesson in patience. He was quiet, humble, and unremarkable. The kind of man no one would remember unless they met him through the barrel of his gun. When the Soviet Union invaded Finland on November 30th, 1939, Simo didn't hesitate. The Red Army had more men, more tanks, more everything. But Finland had will. Every able-bodied man answered the call. The Finnish army gave him a rifle, a uniform, and a spot among the 6th Company of JR-34 positioned along the Kola River. It wasn't courage that brought him there, it was duty. He wasn't looking for glory, he was looking to protect his home. His commanding officer quickly noticed his accuracy. During one training session, Simo hit 16 consecutive targets, each within a second of the other, all without a scope. "He doesn't miss," one soldier whispered. They started calling him the farmer who never blinks. When the first real snow fell in early December, the war changed shape. The Soviet tanks bogged down in deep snow. Frostbite crippled their troops. But for Simo, the cold was a weapon. He learned to listen to it, the way the snow muffled footsteps, the way frost carried sound, the way the human body crackled when frozen. He became obsessed with the smallest details: wind speed, light angle, sound direction. His rifle wasn't just a weapon, it was a companion, an extension of his heartbeat. Each morning before dawn, he would prepare his field position. He'd pack snow in front of his rifle to prevent muzzle flash, pour water over it to harden the surface, and lie there for hours, perfectly still. Sometimes he didn't fire a single bullet all day. Other times he fired once and changed the outcome of an entire skirmish. His movements were minimal, his patience infinite. He didn't chase the kill count, it simply found him. As the days turned into weeks, Soviet morale began to break. Soldiers refused to march without kanks. Officers looked over their shoulders even when no one was there. A single shot could empty an entire trench. One Finnish soldier later said, "The Soviets feared Simo more than they feared the artillery." And perhaps they were right too. Because Simo didn't see himself as a man anymore. He was a presence, something between the living and the dead. Every snowdrift could hide him, every shadow could be his rifle. Every gust of wind could carry death. He no longer ate hot food, he barely slept. He drank melted snow and chewed ice to survive. The men around him began whispering about him like he was more spirit than soldier. "He's still out there," they'd say, "even when we can't see him." And as the snow deepened and the nights grew longer, Simo Hayha, the farmer from Jarvi, faded into something else entirely. A phantom in white, a ghost that breathed frost and spoke only through the crack of his rifle. And every man who heard that sound would never forget it. January 1940. The frost was no longer weather. It was a living thing. It crept into every fold of a uniform, crawled down rifle barrels, and sunk into bone. Soldiers who came to fight began to disappear, not from bullets, but from cold. Their fingers blackened, their faces turned white. But not Simo Hayha. For him, the frost wasn't an enemy, it was an ally. He studied it, tamed it, learned how to move with it. While others cursed the wind, he listened to it. While others saw blizzards as blindness, he saw opportunity. Each morning, before the sun touched the horizon, he performed his ritual, a quiet preparation that bordered on sacred. He'd lie down in the snow, adjusting his rifle until the iron sights aligned with the distance of his breath. Then he'd dig shallow pits, shaping them into perfect firing nests. He'd line the edges with packed snow, pour water over it, and let it freeze solid, creating a shield that swallowed the spark of gunfire. He'd lay his white camouflage, homemade, stitched from bed sheets and rags, over his shoulders. Then he'd wait, and wait, and wait. Sometimes the waiting lasted hours, sometimes days. He would chew snow to keep his breath cold, his lips cracked, his mouth raw. He didn't care. If the Soviets saw steam from his mouth, he was dead. The silence was heavy, the kind that pressed against the eardrums until even the sound of blood moving through veins became deafening. Through his sights, the world was narrowed to one moment, one breath, one heartbeat, one man standing too tall in a sea of white. And then he'd pull the trigger. The rifle sound was sharp, short, final. The echo vanished into the blizzard, and another Soviet soldier fell face first into the snow, his life ending before his body hit the ground. He never used more bullets than necessary. He never spoke after a shot. He just exhaled once, rolled slightly to his left, and vanished into another drift of snow. Every kill was methodical, never emotional. It wasn't hatred that guided him. It was duty, precision, and survival. His comrades learned not to disturb him. They said he could hear enemy boots miles away, that he could sense movement through the snow like an animal, that he could tell a man's rank by the way he carried his rifle. Soon, the Soviet soldiers stopped walking in open terrain. They began crawling, whispering, freezing in fear at every crack of wind that sounded like a shot. Officers wrote reports describing an unseen enemy who does not miss. Soviet snipers were sent to hunt him. None returned. Artillery barrages blanketed the forest where he was last seen, but when the smoke cleared, they found nothing. Only a single set of footprints leading into the trees, ending in a pile of snow that looked just like all the others. Except this one breathed. The Finns began to see Simo differently. He wasn't just a sniper, he was a guardian of Kala. Soldiers told stories of how his presence alone gave them courage. As long as Simo's out there, they'd whisper, "Kala will hold." And it did. Every day, the Soviets advanced. Every day, Simo cut them down. He would take out officers first, then machine gunners, then medics. Each shot broke the enemy's structure. Each silence after his bullet broke their spirit. He once told a fellow soldier, quietly, "I don't hate them, I just have to stop them." By late January, his kill count had passed 200. By February, it was over 400. And by the end of winter, when the trees stood naked and the rivers turned to glass, Simo Hayha had become more than a man. To the Soviets, he was Belaya Smert, the White Death. To his comrades, he was the ghost of Kala. And to himself, he was just a hunter, doing what he was born to do. By February 1940, the forest around Kola was quiet. Too quiet. Not because the Soviets had stopped attacking, but because they had learned fear. Fear of a man they could not see. They told stories around their fires at night about a ghost in white who hunted alone, whose rifle never jammed, whose bullet had no sound. Some said he had no soul. Others swore he could melt into snow. But Simo Hayha was not myth. He was flesh and frost and steel. And he was still out there, waiting. Each morning he slid out of his dugout before sunrise. The cold was so sharp it burned his lungs, but he moved like clockwork, quiet, careful, unhurried. Every motion served a purpose. He would brush over his tracks with a pine branch, spread snow to erase footprints, and crawl through the forest like a shadow. When the light hit the trees, he was already in position. The Soviet scouts would advance in rows, black silhouettes against a wall of white. They would pause, looking over the ridge, and that's when the first one would fall. Then another, then another. One soldier recalled later, "It felt like the snow itself had a rifle." Simo didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He didn't even smile. His eyes stayed locked on the sights. For him, it was never about vengeance or pride. It was about precision, the cold rhythm of cause and consequence. He kept count in his small field notebook. 505 confirmed kills by rifle, dozens more by submachine gun during close encounters. But he never bragged. When asked years later about his record, he simply said, "I did what I was told as well as I could." The Soviets, humiliated by losses, tried everything to kill him. They sent their best snipers, tracked his patterns, even bombarded entire sectors where he was rumored to be. He adapted. He always adapted. When artillery shells rained down on his sector, he'd crawl beneath the snow itself, the earth shaking around him, and emerge hours later, untouched, brushing off frost as if waking from sleep. Once, Soviet sharpshooters believed they finally had him cornered. They spotted a small mound of snow that looked suspiciously shaped, a trap maybe, or a foxhole. They fired at it for hours, wasting dozens of rounds. When they advanced to inspect, they found a rifle barrel stuck in the snow, pointed toward them. Beneath it, an ice sculpture of a man's face, carved crudely from snow, mocking them. The real Simo was already 2 ridges away. He didn't smile when he heard the artillery thunder behind him, but for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a breath that wasn't frozen in his chest. By late February, his legend had spread across both armies. Finnish soldiers would share coffee in the trenches, glancing toward the horizon and murmuring, "Simo's out there today." Soviet radio chatter mentioned him by name, a ghost soldier who haunted Kola, striking from nowhere and fading into snow. Some commanders issued orders to retreat at the first sign of sniper fire, claiming they'd encountered the White Death. The Finns printed leaflets showing a Soviet skull with snow in its mouth, and the caption, "Kola Kesta," the ghost still watches. And the ghost did watch. Always. For Simo, killing was no longer about war. It was about endurance, proving that even against overwhelming odds, one man's patience could bend the tide. When his comrades rotated out for rest, he stayed. When officers ordered him to withdraw, he refused. He said nothing. He simply crawled back into the cold. And so, for 97 days, through blizzards, darkness, and blood, the line at Kola held. And it held because one man decided it would. But war has a way of finding even ghosts. And in March 1940, death finally found him. March 6, 1940. Kola River. The day began like any other. The wind clawed at the trees. The air bit into skin until it bled. The sound of artillery pulsed through the forest like a heartbeat that would never stop. Simo Hayha had already been in position for hours. His body was numb, his fingers wooden, but his focus sharp as ever. He had spotted a group of Soviet officers in the distance, pacing near the tree line. One of them carried binoculars, another barked orders. He steadied his breath, letting the rifle rest perfectly still on its mound of frozen snow. He was patient. He always was. But on that day, the snow betrayed him. A faint glint from his position, maybe ice on the barrel, maybe sunlight on frost, caught the eye of a Soviet marksman. And in the time it takes for a breath to leave a man's body, Simo Hayha's world went white. The bullet struck him in the lower jaw, an expanding round. It tore through flesh and bone, shattering his face in an instant. His rifle fell silent. Blood stained the snow beneath him, steaming faintly in the cold. His comrades found him moments later, still gripping the stock of his rifle, eyes open, face barely recognizable. They thought he was dead. They wrapped him in blankets and carried him through the snow, whispering, "The ghost has fallen." He was unconscious for days. Doctors at a field hospital couldn't believe he had survived the wound. The bullet had destroyed half his face, tearing away his left cheek and jaw. Yet somehow, through the pain and blood loss, he breathed. When he finally awoke on March 13th, the same day the winter war ended, the first thing he asked was simple: "Is the war over?" When they told him yes, he closed his eyes and whispered something no one heard. Some say he smiled, others say he didn't. But the truth was clear. The ghost of Kola had lived. He would never fight again. His jaw was reconstructed through dozens of surgeries. He could no longer speak easily. Eating was a struggle. His face bore the scars of the war forever. Yet even as he healed, his spirit remained unbroken. When journalists later asked him if he regretted anything, he shook his head slowly. "I only did my duty," he wrote on a piece of paper. "I would do it again." To him, the war had never been about hate. It was about survival, not just for himself, but for his country, his brothers in arms, and the land he called home. After the war, Simo returned to his farm in Rautjärvi. He lived quietly, refusing fame or praise. He hunted, fished, and raised his dogs. He spoke little. He smiled rarely. Those who met him later in life described him as polite, calm, and distant, as though part of him had never come back from the snow.
Visitors would sometimes ask him what it felt like to be the White Death. He would shrug and say softly, "I was a good shot." That was all. The legend grew over the decades. Soldiers, historians, and filmmakers studied his tactics, his patience, his stillness, but none could truly capture the essence of what he had become. He wasn't just a sniper. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man who had learned to disappear into the land he loved until even death couldn't find him. In Finland, they still say his name like a whisper carried on the wind. Simo Hayha, the ghost of Kola. A man who turned snow into a shield, silence into a weapon, and fear into survival. They say he became invisible in the snow. Maybe he did. Maybe he simply became part of it.